Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Kalaga, Executive Creative Director of the New York Times live conversation series, Times Talks, and our new film series, ScreenTimes, which hosts exclusive screenings of the most anticipated new studio releases, documentaries, indies, and more. Special thanks tonight to our new presenting sponsor of ScreenTimes, HBO. I'm delighted to welcome you all to tonight's post-screening conversation with the director of Sorry to Bother You, Boots Riley, and its star, Lakeith Stanfield. Moderating this conversation and all events in our ScreenTimes series is veteran New York Times reporter and self-proclaimed film fanatic Logan Hill. Now please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Logan Hill, Boots Riley, and Lakeith Stanfield.
What's up?
Wow.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sounds like this one played well. Hey, thanks for coming tonight. And hello to everyone watching our live stream as well. We will do our very best to avoid spoilers, but don't blame me. I warned you. Everybody else in here has already seen the film, so you may miss out on a little bit up there. But I will say, I saw this film. It's the Sundance premiere, and came out of it thinking this is exactly the kind of movie we want to screen here. You know, a film that you've got to talk about afterwards. A film that's, you know, mostly described as indescribable. That's pretty
easy way out.
Yeah. For our folks that aren't here tonight, do you mind, I know you've got the pitch down. You've got the telemarketer pitch down on this film. I've heard you do it before. For the folks that haven't seen the film just now, do you mind telling the people out on the internet your quick hit on this, what this movie is that they missed and will have to see soon?
Well, this is an absurdist dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction, inspired by the world of telemarketing.
Boom. If you want to know a little bit more, you can go to the New York Times Magazine. You can read a profile called How Boots Riley Infiltrated Hollywood with our writer Jonah Weiner. And then I think next week we've got a video feature that'll be up on the New York Times called Anatomy of a Scene. Which scene did you break down?
The high five montage. I think it might be the first high five montage in cinematic history.
Yeah.
I want to, want that.
Were you
marked.
Were there certain kind of high fives you were trying to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sarcastic high five. We didn't want that one.
Right.
And there's the high five where, someone is clearly marking their hierarchical order, and we didn't want that one.
Yeah.
There's a certain high five that comes out of the Northwest that doesn't really appeal to me.
So Lakeith, were you taking a lot of high five direction? Were there just high fives you were doing that were not going anywhere? Was a lot of choreography involved?
No, I don't know. I just did whatever I felt was celebratory at the time, and so we humped each other for entirely too long. And, I would have hoped that Boots would have stepped in sooner, but I think he was enjoying himself a little bit. So,
I mean, there were many scenes in this movie that we shot that I was enjoying happening so much that I just didn't yell cut.
Yeah.
Well, also, you didn't really use filmmaker terminology a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't say action, you say, go.
Yeah. But sometimes I say funkadelic.
Yeah, you say funkadelic too. And when he wanted us to stop, he said stop. So, which I thought was very cool, and it was a new.
Well, there's all these terms that are just to make yourself be in the club, like duvetine. I was like, people would be like, oh, well, let's put some duvetine on. Well, what? Is that? Do you rub that on or something? But duvetine is a black blanket.
Yeah.
Like, why isn't it just a black blanket?
You also didn't wear a hat, which all direct, you got to wear a hat.
Oh, damn.
And you got to get
forgot.
the hand signals and like, oh, we're pushing in here, we're gonna move out here, and you got to make sure you
Get the eyeglass. Get the eyeglass, which you can have on your phone.
You did none of that. It was dope. It was afros, I think one time you put the damn wig on. The wig I'm wearing in this thing.
I don't remember.
I remember that. I think you trying not to remember that one.
No, I don't. Yeah, maybe I did. I was very sleep deprived, so
Yeah.
I might have gotten silly.
Yeah. What did you bring with you? So, clearly, like, lead vocalist with The Coup, you've been a local activist, a writer, a poet, a teacher, a talking head on TV. You've done all this other kind of storytelling. When you sat down to write this script, your first script, I was asking him backstage, I said, there must have been other scripts on the laptop. You said, this is the one that you worked on.
So even with songwriting, I know a lot of people, I have friends, and by the time I've written one song, they've written 15 or 30 songs. But they've only, out of that's their process, because they'll only have one of those songs that they like. So they'll write all those things to just let themselves go and just to get it out and then figure out what they like. And there's a lot of people with the process like that. But what I'm doing is just with songs, I might write a couple lyrics and I don't know, change that word, this and that, move up a couple more, and so it takes the same amount of time, but I've written parts of songs in my head. So that one script is the same as somebody writing a bunch of other scripts, but I just didn't move on until I was happy with that part.
Yeah.
A couple times I'm like, okay, let me figure this out a little later and move on, but usually I don't do that.
Yeah.
Did you come up with variations on the nigga shit theme? Like, did you did you have versions that were like nigga stuff or like nigga things? Or was it just always nigga shit and you just knew that's what it was gonna be?
Yeah, I mean, that one came out pretty and this is spoiler territory, so turn it off if you don't. But that one came, I wrote this and I took the journey with Cassius. Like, I knew the very first scene, because that was something that my boy Rob Ebo, that's how he got all his jobs. He never got caught, though.
Including the trophies?
Yeah, he had stuff made up, yeah. And, I mean, he got jobs he actually got jobs at, like, Bank of America, like, not as a teller, but, like, as an executive and stuff. I mean, this is before internet, and so you could do that kind of thing. So I knew that was the beginning, and I knew the compliment argument, because that happened to my brother, like, years ago. And I was like, I'm gonna use that in a movie one day. And he didn't know that I used it until he saw the movie. And he was like, what? You know what's and but other than that, I took the journey with Cassius, and all of these things that happen, all the strange and weird things, are things that I felt he needed right then, or we needed to understand him or the world or some bigger idea. It was better for me to bend the reality. That one isn't as much bending reality as others, but I needed him to see himself right then. And that was my first attempt in the script of him seeing himself. And I didn't think that was enough. And so other stuff happened that we won't talk about on this live stream.
All right. In terms of that scene, like, is any of that also rooted in your experience as a performer, going all around the world, playing all different kinds of audiences, different reactions?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely feel that. So it wasn't, so to your point, it wasn't really about those words. Those words drive home the point. And that's one level of it, but it's about highlighting what he's supposed to represent to them. and definitely I've felt like that at many times.
Yeah. And the telemarketing isn't accidental either. That's also based in some real experience that you have. Is there anything that you learned from telemarketing that applied to music, or like in terms of you got to connect with an audience, you got to tell a story to somebody, you got to sell something?
Well, as you see from this movie, my head is a mishmash of things going on, and I actually started. I was at 11 years old. I've been working like since I could work, so that I could buy my own comic books or whatever I needed to do. And I was that 11-year-old kid at your door knocking and crying and saying, I won't be able to sell this subscription, I won't be able to get to Disneyland, and you'd buy it from me. And and so sales, all those things, for the wrong reasons, I learned to listen to people. I learned to understand that people are often saying one thing, but trying to communicate a whole different other thing, or trying not to communicate a particular thing. And I used that later in organizing, and later in songwriting. And all of these things fed upon each other. So by the time I did go to telemarketing, it's actually after our second album. I had, at age 24, I had a midlife crisis and quit all music, and we started this organization called the Young Comrades. But I needed to make money, and I knew I was good at telemarketing. So I actually could just work one day every 2 weeks and make all the money I needed. I didn't have kids or anything, and rent was much cheaper in the Bay Area back then. But yeah, so I was doing that and realizing, by this time we had already had like some popular songs out, and I was doing this as a way to not have to do music and be able to be in Oakland and help organize these campaigns. And but it still felt soul crushing, because I would be using my creative energy just to like get money from people. Technically it was tele-fundraising, but it still was very manipulative. It's probably just the same thing that goes on when you've got artists that might be able to make like a grand statement in art that has ripples through culture and generations, and instead they're somewhere figuring out which font will make you buy more cereal.
Right.
And like most art students, that end up having to do something way different than what they wanted to do.
Well, and that tension, right? Like Lakeith, with your character, with Cassius, we understand why he's making the decisions he's making. Like, he's not making decisions in a vacuum. He's got real stuff going on in his life. And at a certain point, you realize watching this film, like, I'm empathizing with this character so much, but he's the most despised figure on earth, a telemarketer, and then he's also selling slavery and weapons on the black market. As you were reading this script the first time, how did you find a way into locating that character as somebody we can, in some ways, root for?
Yeah, I don't know. I've kind of always looked at life itself almost like one big drama, and I'm just an actor in it on the stage of life. And so just interacting with people that were in a position or not in a position to make my life easier, it's always to some extent been me trying to show someone something that I wanted them to see. So I already kind of understood that aspect of what he was doing. He was attempting to find himself, and in the process of that, sometimes you find yourself through other people. And sometimes when you're in the process of that, you're flailing around and experiencing and experimenting with different identities and themes. And I think one of those is that I'm a respectable person, or that I'm a person you can trust, or that I'm a person that'll do a good job, like whatever that means, like do a good job. And so he was attempting to use those tools to move forward in his life. And I just identified with that struggle, because it was kind of similar for me coming to Hollywood. Yeah. When I first, got out there, I was just in my car, just living in my car, just going to auditions. And people back home were saying like, yo, the motherfuckers don't give a fuck about you. What you doing over there? Come back here, like, and so there was a conflict there that I had to face, and I had to come to terms with what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be and who I was. And so I just kind of identified with that struggle a little bit. And,
is part of that that you know certain things will work, and then you realize you use those because they work, and then you realize maybe that's not me? Like in terms of that idea of trying on different identities?
Well, no. I mean, that's just like a symptom of life, I think. You know, you just play around, you know. But I think that particular journey, it made other people believe, because I had attained different things and I was living in a different space, that I'd become a different person. And so identity is somehow closely related to where you are status-wise in terms of work, or what field you're in what particular field. So that was just an interesting dynamic that I had to think about, like. And becoming Cassius, and when he was a power caller, it stuck out to me. And I remember, like, I would just have like a little audition for like a AT&T commercial, but for people that was coming from where I came from, that was like, I'm already on the big screen, so it created a divide. And I remember people calling me up like mad and incensed, and then it made me mad, and then we got into a compliment argument.
I wonder, Boots, as you're, you know, it's tricky. We've all seen films that, like, you know, have lots going on in them, and sometimes you lose the emotional thread, like the identification with characters, because the devices or the gambits kind of take over, right? At what point does, you know, and I've talked to people who made other kind of magical realist type of films, and they say that's a struggle, like throttling that back and forth, realizing when you've not gone far enough sometimes, and when you've gone a little too far, or you've gone too far away from the characters. Was that tricky as a first-time director?
It was something that I had to keep in consideration as I was writing it, and the whole time. I don't know if it's tricky, but it's something that you have to navigate. There are a few things that I did for that. One, I looked at other films that I did feel go too far. Like, there are people I'm fans. I was watching this interview with Terry Gilliam about Brazil from a long time ago. Or I was listening, I don't know what I did, but it was an interview. And he was saying how he was frustrated that people thought that Brazil was in the future, even though it said somewhere in the 20th century. At the beginning, but a lot of that had to do with the production design being so pushed. And I love the film, but like, yeah, you feel like it's a totally different world. So we straddled that line with production design, but the main thing that kept it there was this dude's face. That kept it grounded, like naturalistic performances, to where, and I think, and it has to do with the approach to it, where it wasn't like, hey, when you get to mark A, you're frustrated. When you get to mark B, now you're mad, you know. And it seems to me that he's not thinking about the result of what's on his face, but more what he's actually feeling right then, whether or not it shows on his face or not, but actually authentically, or as close to, I don't know, feeling that. And so there's a different kind of performance that registers as more real. And then we believe everything. I could have had, you know, flying elephants march through and dance around. As long as we look back at him and he's telling us that this is real, then we believe it.
Yeah. You think it's all about you too? You agree? You think you agree with that?
Of course, I'm a human being. No, I think, yeah. I mean, that's the same way we trick ourselves into thinking reality is real.
Yeah. And I'm curious about this idea, like, I think the film pushes the boundary of what we think is real, right? Over and over and over again. You think you see little glimpses of things, and you kind of pace it out gradually. I mean, we're all living in a time when things we thought weren't possible seem very, very present and immediate right now. You know, it was hard watching this film again this week for me in some ways. I've been thinking, man, I'm turning on my TV when I go home, and it's stuff I didn't expect to see on TV. When you
Wait, can I answer more of that last question before you get onto this?
Yeah.
So the other thing is that the way that it ends up working, I think, is because when I wrote all those crazy things, they had an emotional need to the story, or they illustrated something, or they had some use that later was helped, like whether it's the fact that we're looking at all these details and then we don't know, you know, which one is the foreshadowing one, right? So we're already watching in a certain way. Whereas, let's say, if up till some crazy thing happened, it was like every other movie, then you'd feel cheated because you'd feel like there was just an easy thing that happened. But because all of these things that happen we at least subconsciously feel that there's a reason for them, then we can accept them. And I don't know if that's the only way to do it, but that's the approach that I took.
Yeah. Into that idea of like stretching our sense of what's possible. There's something alarming about this movie, right? Where you're kind of lulled into moving forward with this film, and it definitely is. It's a way for you to talk about issues you've been talking about for your whole career. I wonder, as you're thinking about this as a film that talks about work, that talks about labor, that talks about issues that we don't talk a lot about in movies, other than.
Which is weird because they're in our lives. They're in all of human beings' lives for the beginning, since the beginning of work, mm-hmm. right? And they're not in film. Mm-hmm. How much editing has there been in writers' heads, from producers, to keep these issues out of there, even from any standpoint, you know? Like, there's been plenty of movies situated in workplaces. I mean, everyone is, whether it's, you know, Bad Moms or, you know, or some period piece or something like that.
Drug dealing, prostitute, gangsters.
and most rebellion, and definitely all workplace rebellion, or even just the issue. It doesn't even, maybe the writer doesn't want to write about those people that are involved in that, but it's happening to make it realistic, it'd be happening in their world. Like, how many noontime cafe dates have you ever had? How many noontime cafe dates are there in independent film?
Right.
You know? This is, I mean, you know, we put all these things in there because we're partly, maybe because people are scared that it won't get funded, but I think also there's something more honest yet more scary that happens, which is that when we think about reality, even as a writer creating fiction, we're referring more toward the other fiction for our view of reality. And, you know, because you find that in love songs as well. Like, you know, if I'm writing a love song, you know, there's parameters that are accepted. Like, do you really love me? How long are you gonna love me? Do you love me more than them? You know, those things. But if you think about it, and I have to as a songwriter or a creator, but from years of doing this, like, I have to think about what ideas I really think of in real life, and love might be, I really love you, I'm attracted to you, I don't know, I don't like the kind of TV shows you like, and can you please not laugh like that in front of my friends, because it embarrasses me. Now, if you put that in a song, it's gonna just seem not right, because it's not doing what the other songs did. But those other songs aren't necessarily really representative of love. Mm-hmm. Same thing with film. We've been conditioned to, and this is not even with rebellion or, workplace struggle, but with everything. That's why people do so many cliches. You find yourself thinking that that's the way it happened, or that's the way it happens because we're relying on these other writers who've been relying on these other writers and all that type of stuff. Think about, I've never been to Delhi. I have a picture of it in my head that feels like it's clear if I think about what does Delhi look like. But it's from James Bond films. And obviously that have like racist ideas in them and all that kind of shit. So, yeah, I think that's also, kind of what happened.
That's also where we get, by and large, our perception of human beings and different groups and different subcultures in America, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this film, because I thought it was an opportunity to just explore, blackness and what that means and what that looks like. And I think Cassius represents a larger group of black people than we think. And so I kind of wanted to give that out there for them too, so you could see, or just again look at the idea of the story and the struggle. And at some point you forget that Cassius is black. It doesn't even really matter. It's just that you're going on this journey with him, and he's living a real life and in a real story. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in aligning myself with stories that do that, and this did that as well, in my opinion, which is dope.
Yeah. And what do you think?
You're welcome.
To get a little more specific, to follow up on that, what do you think it is about him that you see in this film that you don't see in similar characters in other films? Other roles you get offered. What is really? Did you dial into that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I just felt like there was a canvas here, which was an opportunity for Cassius to be many things. He didn't have to be confined to anything in particular, and so it left room for exploration. And essentially, he was a human being, which means that he was blank and available for me. He wasn't a trope. He wasn't some lazy idea about what people might think this thing looks like, which you get a lot of that in Hollywood. You just get They do that shit all the time. Like I barely, I have to weed through so much stuff because so much of it is like what he was saying, ideas about what people are. And people are strange. And I'm very interested in people. I mean, look at Boots. But it's beautiful to be strange, and it's okay. We all got our own strange, beautiful thing. And that's perhaps why Cassius, I don't know, is hunched over and he's weird and he does weird because he's a human being. And good material allows you to work that way. And so it kind of drew me to that.
Yeah. Boots, is there something about this? I was thinking about organized labor in cinema, right? You've been an activist for a long time. There are very few films that ever make it through that have any kind of organized labor. You kind of like the classics. We have a lot of film classics, On the Waterfront, Mate One, Norma Ray. But when we talk about those films, they're films that happened a long time ago. And sort of grappling with the contemporary labor movement is something that doesn't happen. And I know this film doesn't have a straightforward approach to it. But is that part of the appeal of placing labor in a context like this, that's taking it out away from the documentaries?
And I think I also want to make clear that I don't think what we see on the screen here is even the contemporary labor movement. It's right. What it could be. And it is what there are seeds of. It's envisioning maybe a more radical approach to it, and that harkens back to maybe when they were the approaches that were taken when it was more powerful. So I'm not necessarily, I just want to say, people should get it however they could get it. I'm not saying that it's joined this particular already established thing. I'm saying make it happen where you are. And but anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to point that out. I don't remember the rest of your question.
Is there something? It's often hard to talk to people about labor, and putting it in this kind of wild package allows you to get at a lot of ideas that I'm sure.
Well, yeah, there's a labor struggle that is the work stoppage and strike is probably the most realistic, the most normal thing in the movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe that helps.
Yeah, we don't see it. When speaking of the protest, there's the soda can that gets thrown. I've heard that you have a similar experience in your own history, but was it also a riff on Kylie Jenner and the Pepsi, give him a Coke ad?
This screenplay, I wrote it in 2012. It was published on McSweeney's in 2014. Same story, same everything. I edited some dialogue and stuff like that. So I'm just saying this came out in 2014. That came out way after.
Mm-hmm.
You was predicting some shit, man.
Or some people read it. Unfortunately, there was also a line that we took out from Mr., which is Omari Hardwick's character, which is Mr. and 7 underscores. That when he's making his pitch to Cassius, that said in the 2014 version, worry-free is making America great again.
I had
to take it out because the world had made my script too on the nose.
Lakeith, last question before we wrap up. The first time you watched cuts, hearing David Cross's voice come out of your mouth, what did that feel like? What was your impression? And how did that work? Did you know?
I ran away in terror. It was really strange. It made me feel very uncomfortable, actually. It was, because we did all that stuff, we just mouthed it. We didn't actually make sounds, so we just mouthed.
Some of them you did, though. Yeah, we kept trying different stuff because we were very hard up for money, so sometimes we didn't have somebody to be able to look and read the
Oh, I did something like that?
Yeah. You did some with your own voice.
Oh, okay. Well, most of the ones I remember doing, I was just moving my mouth, and so I didn't know what it would sound like or what would be the end result. So when I saw it, it was really quite freaky. But they were so good at doing it that there were parts that were really fucking funny, and it just had me like, I'm like, okay, I got an idea about like what white might sound like, and I'm like, that shit is some funny white shit. It's like, I don't know. It's like I'm like, oh, white is really funny. Like I didn't even like there's a part where like I'm like tapping my finger and I just did something and that wasn't even supposed to be overdubbed. And this fucker went in there and said do.
And
so good.
So here's the other thing I should point out. First person to sign on to this movie before I had any producers or money or even have been in SF Film or Sundance, David Cross. And second person, Patton Oswalt. And so I knew that they were gonna be part of it, didn't quite know what, and then I told them both they were gonna do white voices. And they were both hyped, but I had to figure out who was gonna play who. This is, the movie's already shot and we're editing, and I realized, okay, it has to be David Cross, has to be Cassius, and then Patton came a couple hours later, and I had to explain to him, I was like, actually, you're gonna do Mr. Blank. And he was like, oh, really? And then, he was kind of let down. And I said, yeah, because what I realized is that, Cassius's white voice needs to be unmistakably the whitest voice that anyone could think of. And I realized that David Cross's voice is just a little bit whiter than yours. And then he was like, oh yeah! His voice is whiter than mine. And he was happy.
All right, folks, we're gonna wrap up the live stream part right now. Thank you all for watching on the live stream. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, yo. Oh, July 6th is in select cities. July 13th everywhere.
Fantastic.